probably still some connection issues. And I think one of the other things we talked about doing was a trip to visit with CNS and some of the other, I guess, people in the state who might be involved with a hub and spoke type model. And I basically just looked at my calendar and thought I'd bring that up to you guys and see what we could get on the books for next year. And then I have in here, Wes, you were going to look at potentially figuring out ways to increase engagements with people involved with the franchise. Have you had further thoughts on that or a chance to look into that?
No, no, most of ours are going to be a little bit more difficult. Ours is primarily with Waste Management, and they negotiate them all separately out of me.
Right.
I have started that with a different plan, which is I've started coordinating with, well, we finally got our meeting yesterday with Waste Management to try and do a thing where we're going to try and do a very small sample size of about 6 multifamily home or multifamily dwellings. They will pick the facility, or they will come up with a list of facilities that are the most manageable to work with. Based off location, access, all those kind of things. We don't want to set ourselves up for failure, but I can potentially provide some financial backing depending on what kind of other things we need, but they already have some educational materials and things like that. And the plan would be to package it up as a pilot project and take it to my board, because my board is asking for more detailed information and reporting on multifamily recycling and diversion rates and things like that. And so the plan will be to work with Waste Management directly to create essentially a pilot program, have the board members each actively become ambassadors for those sites to work on those sites individually. We know we'll have some that'll likely fall off during our plan, but then we will at least have some metrics on, like man hours and how much education it took and what kind of educational materials did we have to deal with. And then also we'll have some diversion rates based off of, I think the plan will be, our target is to see, if they have a 2-yarder right now, maybe we can get them to a 1-yarder, and then we're able to start separating out. Nothing's going to be perfect. We're not weighing it, but we're going to at least have some sort of a percentage or a metric based off of what they did. And that'll be kind of the plan. Obviously, this is going to happen well after we're done. So we're just getting on the initial side. So I took that as a challenge, and we're trying to do that. I also reached out. So I did a little bit of searching across the state border around here and looking around. So Waste Management in our area, they operate the Lockwood landfill, which has 0 sorting at all. The only sorting that's done up here is going to be in each local jurisdiction. We have a sorter at commercial, essentially, but there's no other real. There's not a whole lot of other sorting that's done in Washoe County. Okay. It'll be Carson probably has some, and I don't know everything that everybody has that's around here.
Yeah.
California in Sacramento, Waste Management has a massive MRF. I say massive because it'll be big for that area at least. And they can handle they basically can take everything and sort out of that one facility. They do the one big bin type setup in Placer County and some of the neighboring California counties. So there is going to be a challenge depending on what kind of plans or rules or things like that go into place. If we're not careful, we end up sending stuff across state lines and increase travel and those kind of things, and just increase local costs. So that's kind of information I came up with, which is why, people like Nick are great to talk to, because that's outside of my realm. So
exactly. And Patty had put together those maps, and I actually called up the recycling hubs and spokes map that she sent out, and I can share that for discussion, because I think that could maybe help with that discussion so that we do try to avoid that transboundary hauling and stuff like that. But yes, this is what I've got right here. And Patty, nice to see you, or blue screen, Patty. And I hope you're doing well today.
Yeah, I'm actually on 2 computers. My other one wasn't, I didn't have any sound. So I'm in my cubicle and I don't have a camera.
Oh, no,
But
I understand.
nice to be here. I'm finally here.
Well, glad to have you. One great addition to our team is Mr. Nick Diaz. He is with Endurance Environmental. They haul our trash here in and recycling here in Clark County, and he's got a wealth of experience and understanding that we lack, I think, in this group around transport. So I think he's going to hopefully help provide us with some insight. So I called up the map, Patty, that you developed around the hub sites and kind of the radiuses. So maybe this might help supplement what Wes was doing in terms of trying to understand where we're trying to get material to and where the gaps exist. And, you know, like we talked about last time, there's some really big empty spots here.
Yeah.
And I think we are also trying to understand, or at least when I looked at this, one of my questions was, how does the big MRF fit in here in Las Vegas? If there's not a big MRF up in Reno, where's our next nearest MRF? I know there's one in Boise, there's one in Salt Lake. There obviously are things in California, but where does that all fit in? And
I guess that one thing that to consider is collecting material separated and not necessarily sending it to a MRF. And so that, you know, I mean, I don't know how we can, we haven't really talked about how, you know, getting material to MRFs and the cost and associated with that. But with the hub and spoke, like in New Mexico, basically they, or other places, they collect material separated and then bale it at the hubs and, you know, send it off to market. So, you know, the big gaps in the southern part of the state, there's just not a lot of population.
no,
So that's why we don't have anything there. I mean, there has been talk of like sub hubs or sub spokes, you know, spokes sending material to other spokes and then to a hub. So like with Tonopah or sending it to Beatty. So I don't even know if Beatty is, I think it's on there somewhere around there.
That's Beatty. Yeah.
So
that's Beatty right there.
You know, Tonopah Goldfield. I mean, you know, I looked at it and looked at mileage going up north. You know, at first you think, oh yeah, we should go south. It's like, well, maybe we shouldn't go south. Maybe we should go north.
Right.
But you know, all of these things are up in the air at this point. You know, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, and Wes has his hand raised too. But one of the things that I thought of is from, you know, there's pluses and minuses to single stream recycling. Obviously, you increase contamination when everybody can just throw it all in one bin, but then that reduces the number of trucks on the road or number of routes we have to have. If, you know, if we're hauling plastic separate from cardboard, separate from aluminum, potentially that might mean 3 different routes, unless it can all go on one truck. But if it's not all going to the same place, that might be challenging. But that was just my thought. Wes, what was your thought?
So you stole my thought. I think that's I think is a really good point. And Patty, I don't disagree, but at the same time, California, at least Northern California, has gone to a single stream type of platform where Waste Management, which operates in both regions here. So I think we have to take their business operations into account. They have a large MRF in Sacramento that's set up to do single stream, whereas we don't have that same setup here. And they're even bringing half of their waste to Lockwood, and Lockwood doesn't have any sorting whatsoever. I do know that there is planned for an expansion for Waste Management towards the south end of Washoe County, but the site I doubt is going to be large enough to put in that type of sorting. So
right. The only sorting, you were right, is that Commercial Row, and they're taking out cardboard and glass.
it's not big enough to even, so even if we were to go and say everybody in the community must recycle, that site's not big enough to handle it.
Yeah. Well,
so we would end up with waste we would end up with recycling and waste regardless, because we don't have a method to actually deal with it. And I don't believe that there's going to be a site that's going to be large enough to handle that process in this region. You'd have to go further out, which then would increase costs for travel.
yes. Yes, I agree. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what waste management plans are, but I know they're only taking, they bring our recyclables there, and then they take out the cardboard and glass and send everything else to Sacramento. So, yeah, I mean, we're certainly open to collecting it single stream, if that works.
So can we ask the expert on the call about this? So if we were to if we had to separate everything, let's just assume for the sake of discussion, we've got cardboard, tin and aluminum, and plastics all separated out from the source. So like people put it into different bins at the Fallon transfer station, for example. We would then it would have to depend on volume, right? Nick, how many trucks we would need to get it back into the Sacramento area or wherever?
Yeah, that's gonna be the biggest thing with any hauling, is gonna be the volume of what it is that you have, and the question is gonna be, is the juice worth the squeeze when it comes to hauling with that? So again, yeah, the biggest thing is gonna be volume and what it is, what's that tonnage look like hauling out.
So to me, then, if it's a volume thing, then maybe the non-source separated is the way to go, just to make sure we get volume. And I'm just kind of brainstorming. I'm not trying to direct or dictate, but
right. Yeah, I mean, somebody's got to pay for either way, right? So it's like, is there value in the mixed material, or how? I guess that was the kind of how the question is, like, do you get some return if there's if you have just bales of cardboard or bales of aluminum or whatever,
Yeah. Well, that's the problem is when you start talking about returns, and that makes me think you mean rebates, because rebates are pretty tough to navigate, right? So I think funding it is going to maybe we ought to look at funding it differently. And I think that's where we were at from the last meeting, was looking at some of the funding, right? Not outside of rebates, just because rebates make sense and it's easy to sell that to a municipality, but it's really, really hard to implement that.
Well, and so this is a topic that came up with Waste Management and myself when we were talking about, pilot program for a multifamily, and multifamily are going to be like, well, if I'm going to put this much effort in, do I get something back?
Right.
And realistically, what you get back is a cheaper waste bill, because you're not producing as much waste.
Right.
Now, that said, Waste Management, Republic, Nate's side of things, they can't offer rebates. They still have to haul the same amount. Essentially, they're still hauling the same weight. It's just in 2 separate loads now, so it's twice the work. And I think that ultimately funding and something is going to have to be done, but that's going to have to be done at a much higher level, because otherwise it's going to be implemented in.
Oh, we froze.
I think the other aspect is going to be, do we even have the infrastructure or the ability to achieve some of these? Or do we have to actually refocus to figure out, do we have to find a method to even be able to do this? Are we putting the cart before the horse, so to speak?
Hey, Jessica, can you go back to that map real quick?
Certainly.
So just because I'm new to the group, I just want to make sure that I understand correctly. So So there's gaps in where we're doing where recycle is being picked up, and so what we're trying to do is we're trying to fill in those gaps and get that recycle to a recycle facility.
Yep.
Well,
Or an end user.
So
Sorry,
this
Patty.
is just a theoretical.
Yeah.
This is not happening currently. None of it.
Yeah, no.
Right?
Yeah.
So what we did was kind of just look at the state and say, okay, if we had, if we can, set up something, how would it look? And so we were looking at distance. So the blue circles are 60 miles radius, and then the tan is 100 miles from that central hub. And so all the dots are like possible spokes that would feed material into the hubs, right? And so, I mean, there is some recycling going on, but not very much. Like the Fallon was collecting material, but last I heard, they weren't sending it anywhere. Big Meadow in Lovelock is collecting some, but they'll ask me, oh, who's taking what? Elko they do some as well, and I think they send stuff to Salt Lake. Ely, they're only collecting aluminum right now, and when we went there in September, they had one bale, So Pahrump, they are doing stuff down there, and he does sort. Mike Smith with CNS does have some sorting. I haven't been there, so I don't really know what they're doing. Right. So yeah, this is all theoretical. There is some infrastructure on the ground, but not a lot. And so we did one trip in September along the 50 corridor from basically Fernley to Baker, which is like where the national park is, right? Great Basin National Park. And so they are very interested at the national park in getting their material somewhere that's going to recycle it. Ely, we being NDP, had given them a couple grants to get, some infrastructure. So they have two covered outdoor areas. One covers their baler, and then one was for storage. But then shortly after that, they stopped collecting material because of the prices were so low on cardboard, basically. So like I said, the only thing they're doing right now is aluminum. Eureka actually just purchased a baler for their cardboard, and they are doing cardboard and aluminum, but see, they're constricted by, their landfill is constricted by geography. They can't expand it, and so they have an incentive, and they also have money, which helps. So we were trying to figure out, how, what infrastructure there is, what we need, and then can we do a run along the 50 corridor and pick up, material that's baled from these, sites that we have. So that was kind of our first, we were kind of first looking at Elko, but the people there weren't really interested in working with us very much, except for, like I said, Waste Connections does own Elko Sanitation, and they are interested. So, it's like there are pieces out there, and so I guess that's the thing, is like, how do we connect the pieces and what makes the most sense, to make it work? Collecting single stream, collecting it separated, we're open to whatever works,
And that's why something you said about, the way Ely was collecting cardboard and then the bottom dropped out of the market. I'm paraphrasing, you didn't say that, but when the prices fall, that's where the rebate structure really has an Achilles heel. Like, it's easy to sell that to a municipality or a group that, hey, you're going to get money back for all your aluminum, right? Like, that's a nice, easy, clean selling point. But when those commodity prices change, or something way outside of our control happens, tariffs or the China sword or something like that happens, all of that throws those rebates into a tizzy. And then if you're relying on that to fund your program, you no longer can fund your program. So I go back to the concept of, how do we get this funded? And I think we need to, I don't think we're putting the cart before the horse too much, because we do have places that can take that material, and we should probably put that on this map somewhere, like where would be the end users for this material. And then we can get pricing on hauling, essentially rough pricing, nothing contractual, but rough ideas how much it costs to haul it, rough ideas how much it costs to handle it, and start figuring out what the right structure is to fund all of that. Does that make sense? That's sort of where my brain is going.
Makes sense to me. Yeah. Well, I mean, cost avoidance is one of the, selling points for, and
yeah, but that's a lot harder sell than, hey, we're going to come up with a franchise agreement that's going to meet a state goal for recycling, or there's an incentive at the state level for funding programs for illegal dumping, or, you know what I'm saying, host fees if there's a privately owned landfill. Of course, my people would shoot me in the head for saying that, but I feel like, so I think going back to that, funding is going to be a mission critical point. But we need to start with, where is this material actually going to wind up, whether that's up in here or Salt Lake or Boise or Vegas. Where's the end use? How much does it cost to get it there? How much does it cost to put it on the truck? And we can look at both source separated and single stream. That's
well,
that sounds.
I think you bring up a really good point with the funding. One of the concerns I would have is, like, who's going to provide that funding? Likely it would have to be from the state. And I don't know how the state, where that money will come from, unless NDEP is getting a perpetual grants, because nobody's going to want to build infrastructure unless there's some sort of a fee associated with it for them to be able to keep it and maintain it. So, and likely that none of the ARPA funding would cover something that's going to be long-term. Those are intended to be short-term emergency type builds. So I think that, and that's why I was coming to the point of, we have somewhat of an infrastructure, but we don't have a complete infrastructure. Even if we were going to go a single bin, single sort, I don't know how Pahrump is set up, so maybe they could go ahead and do that now, but Northern Nevada can't.
Right.
Which means then we're sending stuff to California, and I don't know how that would work. That would have to be a conversation with Waste Management, right?
Yeah. Not to mention the optics are terrible to send stuff to California. I mean, let's get real. They'd rather send it across the state to Salt Lake City than send it to Cali.
Yeah,
Oh, we lost you, Wes, again.
will end up probably being top of our list.
You froze up there for a second. Would you mind repeating that?
Sorry, I even plugged in to try and fix my internet connection up here. I think funding is going to probably be the top of our list in order to figure out how best do we develop a hub and spoke model, because I mean, even if we permit and put in requirements, I don't know that we have the infrastructure to support our own requirements.
And then that goes back to that avoidance of an unfunded mandate. None of us want to do that. But yeah. I think we have to know at least a ballpark of what that cost might look like, so that, because that might change the funding mechanisms a little bit. If we need round numbers, 10 million, that's a lot different than 1 million. So
here's a question.
Yeah.
This is specifically more towards you because you are in the industry. What the hell does it take to build a massive single sort type of a facility?
Yeah, so our recycling center down here in Las Vegas, that is, at one time it was the largest. This year Waste Dive reported it as number 4 because our volume changed. I'm not quite sure I believe those numbers, but so we're in the top 5, right? So that facility, from like breaking the ground through building in solar panels and optical sorters, like this is the Mercedes-Benz or the Tesla, right? So that is around a $10 million project.
Okay? So We could probably bump that to 15 nowadays.
Right.
And
Now, I will say part of the problem is the permitting and zoning in City of North Las Vegas is beyond heinous. So if you built it in an area that had different zoning and permitting requirements, you could knock that cost down again, probably by 20%.
so we could potentially find areas here in northern Nevada where that would be a little bit more palatable, and do that, but we would still need to find an owner.
Right.
And you have to have enough material to feed it. And that's why they don't have one up here, right? In
Well,
Reno.
If we were able to start talking about how do you create, how do we best start to solve some of these issues, we need a large facility that's a little bit closer in location to the larger population sources that are up here that can handle that. Then what we do is you'd have one north, one south. Then we figure out essentially getting the hub and spoke model from the other quasi large jurisdictions to get there, because then the funding source becomes more palatable. Or we have to look at 5 or 6 of these type of facilities up here, and 5 or 6 facilities are a lot tougher to build than 1, possibly 2.
Well, and I would also say, remember, we built the Tesla model. You can do a Honda Accord model that is much, much more affordable, just as durable, may not have all the bells and whistle and the fancy solar panels and the fancy learning center. I mean, our facility is honestly a little bit ridiculous in how nice it is. It's the nicest public facility or garbage facility I've ever been to. It's ridiculous. And I say that with love. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I think that you could easily do this for a couple $1 million, especially in an area where the zoning hurdles are not that bad. The permitting requirements aren't that bad. The soil alone there was heinous to build on. It was a terrible spot to build on because of the natural soil. So I think selecting the right site could cut the cost down a lot. And maybe you do build some kind of baby MRFs. We have a smaller MRF we just reopened this year. And that one, we put in a baler, a conveyor belt, and rehabbed all of the sprinkler systems inside the existing shell of a building with an appropriate pad. And that was like $1.5 million. So that, and with the obnoxious zoning requirements that we had to deal with. So I feel like you don't have to go the Tesla route.
Well, that makes me think of, we were talking about the NDOT rail plan. And so if you could put it on a rail up like in the Fallon area, if you could site it there, then you could probably get material from elsewhere, sent a lot cheaper from, I don't know, all around the surrounding areas. That that's my thought. If we were going to do that, that would be my recommendation. Try and tie it in with the rail plan.
And that could be a phased approach, right? If I'm building it as a business, that's a phased approach. Select a site that has the ability to scale up and get on rail, like phase 2, phase 3, phase 4.
Yeah, exactly.
But I still kind of think we need to. So the reason why the big giant MRF got built the way it did, we had the existing older MRF that then closed and now is reopened, as I mentioned. But the reason we built the big super MRF down here is because we went to a franchise agreement that required us to collect single stream recycling. And that was a no-brainer then. Okay, we're going to invest all this money in this giant MRF. That makes sense. And then because it's for public and we're so close to Phoenix, the headquarters, they decided to make it so fancy. But so it is a little bit of a chicken or an egg cycle, but I go back to, we need to know where the gap is for the end use, plug in the existing end users wherever they may be, figure out the costs, look at the funding, and then try to start figuring out the mechanism as well to attract business to build something there, I mean, Waste certainly isn't going to do it unless there's business there, but they're smart enough to look down the road as well, especially if there's something in writing.
Well, and I think the point is no one is going to go and build a big, large MRF, even in Fallon, unless they're going to get an appreciable return, or they're going to be guaranteed a return in X amount of time to be able to satisfy the investors and or the payback on the loans.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to do that, I think that the state's going to have to look at either rules or requirements or something that then would create the need to actually have these things in order for those investments to come in, or they're going to have to be state and or county owned facilities in their entirety. And if the state owned it and operated it and did all of that, then you don't have to look at what you wouldn't have to consider the franchise agreements to get it there. You'd have to just do it through education.
Right, which is a little bit more risky, but doable.
That depends on
yeah,
on what kind of a successful model you want.
Yeah.
Because we're in the system up here. We have MRFs because we have required single stream recycling.
Right.
If we didn't have required single stream recycling, there would be no MRF. It would all be voluntary. They would have the separated bins out there and you could do it however you wanted.
But if you had that required single stream recycling, for example, statewide, and to keep it from being an unfunded mandate, we figure out the funding mechanism. Having that two-prong approach then would be very attractive to some kind of business, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's not.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, if you had like a state-owned facility
Mm-hmm.
or a state-operated facility that was leased to the local county utility.
Right. Well, and a lot of times this happens more with landfills where they'll hire a company like Waste Management or Republic or Waste Connections to run their landfill or run their MRF for them. But they own the dirt, they own the permits, they own it, but they want somebody else to run it.
Yeah, they own the site and it's essentially a contracted operator.
Yep.
It's the same way most of your homeless shelters actually operate. They're usually some sort of a local entity owns the site and the building, but they don't want any part in the operations.
Right.
So I think that there's opportunities there, but again, even if it's a state-owned facility, if there's no impetus to actually send material there, then you're going to be paying people to sit around.
Right. And most of the recycling legislation applies to the bigger counties in, population wise. And so that it may be a long-term project to get it, updated, or even if it's just the 6 counties. I mean, I think Nye was going to be in on, over 45,000 population with 2020 census. So we may have 7 counties that have populations over 45,000. But if we could at least get those counties included, that would be pretty much around the state, because that's kind of where all these hubs are located already. So the other thing I was thinking of was working with the brownfields people to see if, they had some sites that for possible development. And then as the funding, we have the flat fees on the landfills. And so is there an appetite for increasing that, or something like that? So
I think that would be from an economic standpoint. I'm taking my Republic hat way off here, but from an economic standpoint, changing the fee structure around landfills makes sense, especially if you tie it to the tons disposed, because then there's an incentive to reduce the tonnage going into the landfill, because then you pay less fees, right? But you'd still have that mechanism to fund some type of recycling infrastructure. And I think that was that on the list from last time.
I think
Yeah,
that's
solid waste
Yeah.
fees.
I think it's a really good point, but I also, like you, taking my government hat off,
Hmm.
how do you actually get that to work in a community that, like, where you have multiple cities and jurisdictions that are sending their waste there, all based off of franchise agreements?
Yeah.
So you'd either have to demonstrate a diversion rate that gets everybody a reduction,
Yeah.
or otherwise all that happens, or all it looks like, is an increase in fees, because there's no method to actually address it.
Hmm.
And I think that's possible.
Oh, I agree.
And yeah, because there's like this annual state solid waste fees, and then there's also the tonnage fees, right? Or tipping fees.
I don't think we have tip. I mean, the state doesn't get any tipping fees.
No, but maybe there's what's the word I'm looking for? An add-on to that tip fee
Hmm.
that gets charged to then we're going to increase the illegal dump. If we make it more expensive to throw stuff away, more people are going to
Right.
go dump in the desert.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, the landfills, the only private ones are Apex and Lockwood, right?
Right.
The rest of them are owned by the municipalities.
And
So
there's no way Waster Republic is going to agree to host fees that would change the infrastructure for the whole state. I mean, if it were spread across the whole state, well, Western Elite's a privately owned landfill.
oh yeah, that's right.
So you got Western Elite, and I thought Pahrump Valley Disposal was also private, but it may be contracted by the county.
Yeah, I'm not the
But they're small.
inspector. Yeah. So I don't know.
So we have some info gaps.
The major ones.
Yeah, the major ones where you're actually getting a lot of tonnage coming in. I mean, but again, Republic and Waste are never going to agree to be the primary funders for this. That
Right.
If it was a blend of things, that might be a lot more palatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we have a lot of work to do.
We do. We have questions and answers, right, Patty? Good.
Right.
Structure-wise, would it make sense, because we're all kind of talking in parallel but have different points, would it make sense for us to kind of write a little narrative to the team and say, this is what I was thinking, or what's the best way to consolidate our ideas and kind of put them together in a usable form for the next meeting?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the other work groups are doing. I know people are doing all kinds of fancy stuff, but I'm kind of the opinion, maybe we sort of go back and think about this a little bit more and try to send everybody an email with maybe a couple paragraphs about what you think this could look like, with three main objectives. One is in my opinion, we have to identify the gaps in where the material can go, figure out the costs to get it there, figure out the funding mechanisms. And to me, that's a three-pronged approach, but I'm also getting lost in my own words. So, a long week.
Yeah. Okay, I think that sounds like a good plan.
It would at least be a start, and then we can kind of try to figure out how to make this more concrete for the purposes of NDEP's sustainability group. Yes, Wes?
So I had held off on saying it because one of the things that I did find in doing a bunch of research with, and even figuring out the pilot program, or working on a pilot program with waste management and stuff, is the common theme that I did find, and this was from east to west all the way out to New York and north to south, because I looked at a whole bunch of different programs for how they did it and kind of took little pieces of each one that I thought would work. But the common theme about recycling and how to make your programs grow was nothing grew until a rule was put in place with a time frame to meet it.
Right.
because no business was going to voluntarily take the hit at first, just like Republican Waste Management won't either. And I
froze up there again.
It's Friday. It's time to go. There's a beer.
Right.
It is. I'm making a few notes. I haven't been taking notes like before, but I'm making a few notes on kind of what I think we could talk about and put some more concrete ideas around.
Real quick too, Jessica. So I have
Yeah.
all the stuff that you sent me, and so what I want to do is I want to look at that map and then understand exactly where you do have some stations at, and then
Mhm.
try to see if there's some way I can figure out or help you guys co-locate something, and then see what the hauling looks like for that. So I'm gonna take a look at that. Maybe at the next meeting I can present you something and
Perfect.
maybe come up with some ideas. And I there's someone I have that'd be interested in that I would use to help me
Great.
kind of figure that out as far as how we co-locate something, see how that looks, and then see how that that hauling, even if it's not to Vegas, even if it's like you said to Salt Lake City or somewhere else, but just to have an idea of what that would look like. I think that would help you guys out.
Yeah, I agree.
That'd be awesome.
That would be great. Yeah, that's been our missing piece is I don't have any information about haulers and
Yeah.
transporting. So that would be really awesome.
Cool. And I think end users in MRF can be in state and out of state. And then once we have blend of funding, because I think it may take several different avenues to bring all this together. The other one would be, what am I missing here? I feel like I'm missing something. It is Friday. Brain dead.
That's pretty much what you were
Mhm.
saying.
I can also reach out and figure out new MRF, whether it's a super MRF or kind of a basic MRF.
a mini MRF.
Right. Yep. And I agree with Wes on the rule and time frame. There has to be some kind of regulatory driver, but we can't let the piece of the funding be ignored. So,
Right.
all right, cool.
We're going to need both of it. I think, can you add one more note
Love
that
to.
that funding, you said it earlier, and it just dawned on me that we need to incorporate it. The funding has to include addressing illegal dumping across the state. I think
100%.
I think no matter what happens as we go forward, I think we need to just continually keep that in there and say whatever funding we do. I also think that even if we say there's going to be a rule, or let's say we actually get that to happen, I think one of the things that'll help us make it more palatable across the state and to regulators is if we also have the component of what we will do to address these other issues.
Yeah. And like you said last time, it's highly possible that if we set more bins out for recycling, that those become illegal dumping locations. That's extremely likely. So, yep. All right, cool. Well, we'll get this started. It is the 10th of December. I know that people are really nuts this time of year. Do we want to try to meet again with this group before Christmas, or should we start again in the new year?
New Year.
New Year before the 11th of January, because I'm going to be out for a few weeks after that.
What? You're not allowed. No.
It's not for fun.
Oh, well, you're definitely not allowed. I'm sorry to hear that. Okay.
Hip surgery.
Oh, phooey,
Wow.
Patty. That's no cool.
Hey, it'll
not
be good
fun.
when I'm done, right?
It will. It will. And I hope that goes smoothly for you.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot available between now and I have nothing really for next week. Maybe next Friday if we were going to meet, or the following Monday. But other than that, I'm pretty much booked until we start talking about the week of the 3rd.
Let's talk about the week of the 3rd.
Week of the 3rd. Yeah. So I'm open the 3rd, 6th, or 7th.
Okay. I have good
Maybe even
availability.
Wednesday. The Wednesday's not. I don't have much on there either. Something in the morning.
I'm tied up on Wednesday, but I have time on the 3rd, the 6th. There's some time on the 7th. And some slots on the 4th, maybe.
Let Jessica know when you're available. I'm pretty open.
Would
We
sometime
can
the
iron
morning
it out
of
on
the,
Monday.
the morning of the 6th, would that work? Yeah, we'll iron it out, and maybe
Okay.
I think that could work. So
Okay, cool.
awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. And if I don't, I'm sure I'll be talking to you, but yeah, have a great weekend.
Thanks.
You guys too.
You too.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Nick,
guys.
thank you for joining.
Yeah, nice
Bye.
to meet you.